Hi, welcome back to Rooftop Talks. Different rooftop, same mug. I remember seeing Earthling Ed on a podcast. He was asked by the hosts, what do you think the strongest argument against veganism is? You know, what if you had to steel man your argument, what would it be? This is so lazy by the hosts. It's like, can you please, you're really good at this, can you please defeat yourself? Because I can't do it. Earthling Ed is out here campaigning on the behalf of real victims, real animal victims. And you're asking him like, yeah, but could you provide us a counter argument? Let's say you didn't have conviction in your cause. How would you argue? Like, would you have asked Nelson Mandela, yeah, I get you're against apartheid, but steelman your position. What would you say is the best argument in favor of apartheid? Could you be balanced, Mr. Mandela? Man, give me a fucking break, you know? But nonetheless, Earthling Ed was a stand-up gentleman and he graced them with an answer. And I won't repeat what the answer is, but he said, this is one that I come across a lot with non-vegans. I'm not going to tell you what it was, because you'll have heard it before and no point. But I thought for this video, maybe I'll tell you my one. The one that I find is like a nightmare for people like me. It's a really tricky one. And I have no problems doing this because I'm not giving any ground with this. This is not an excuse to be used, but it is one that I fear, I suppose. And so it's one that I want to address here. And look, you'll be disappointed if you think I'm ever going to give any kind of answer that gives people an excuse or a reason or a justification to abuse animals. You're sorely mistaken. So in my opinion, the worst argument that a vegan can come across, the worst, not the most effective, not the most reasonable, but the worst, and perhaps the most destructive and pervasive and difficult one, it's very simple. It's the argument that all of the heinous crimes that we perpetrate against animals, all of the enslaving, all of the killing, all of the abuse, the ritual, routine, culturally ingrained abuse towards defenseless, innocent animals, all of it, that it's not a big deal. It's just not a big deal. What we strip them of and deprive them of, the torture we force on them as a consequence of our lack of consideration, as a consequence of their objectification, as a consequence of them having slave status. The little comment, the little subtle undermining that it's not a big deal. And they might not say it using the words that I just used. It's not a big deal. They might not use those exact words. They could be a lot more sneaky with this. They can simply frame things, present things, convey things in a way where it seems as if the animal holocaust, yes, it is a holocaust. The animal holocaust is not a big deal. It's absurd, but it is quite popular and it's quite effective. It does something. It's a form of gaslighting, a very underhanded form of gaslighting. Gaslight was a film that came out in like the 1940s. I don't know, it's like a black and white movie. And it's a really good movie. I suggest you watch it. It's where this word comes from, and it's typically heard in the subject of domestic abuse. An effective form of gaslighting is one where you are able to convince the person you're talking to that they're going crazy, or that they are somehow ungrounded, unstable, that the reality that they're seeing is not, in fact, actual reality, that they're blowing things out of proportion. I am able to recognize this, and I think anyone who's either been in an abusive relationship or had someone they know be in an abusive relationship and has tried to help them to get out of that abusive relationship, you'll see the telltale signs. You'll be able to identify these very subtle ways of presenting things that make the receiver of these comments question in their own head, am I making a big deal out of this? And it's funny because since I've gone vegan, there have been multiple times And I will admit this to you, there have been multiple times where the state of change, like the change within my mind and how mind-fucked this whole thing is to me, has caused me to lay awake at night and think to myself, am I making a big deal out of this? Like, am I blowing this out of proportion? And luckily, every time I do have that thought creep up, the answer has been a resounding no. I am not making a big deal out of this. If anything, I am underplaying the situation. But I know where that comes from, and it's not come from within me, within my soul. That little mind bug, that's been created by others in their underhand comments, in the way that they frame things. It's very difficult to call out. That's the thing with gaslighting. That's why gaslighting is so effective. It's because it's a difficult thing to identify and call out. And sometimes you are able to. Like, I've seen some absurd cases of gaslighting. I was protesting with Joey Carbstrong outside of an organization where we were spreading awareness through the peaceful protest of pigs in gas chambers. So basically, if you don't know, the vast majority of UK pigs are slaughtered by lowering them into gas chambers, and they suffocate and they asphyxiate them with carbon dioxide gas, which is an aversive gas. We have an abundance of video evidence to show this. The RSPCA is in on it, the supermarkets are in on it, they know about it, and of course the farmers are in on it, and the abattoirs are in on it. They all know about this, but they have tried for the longest time to just keep it out of public eyes because no one wants to be funding gas chambers. No one wants that. Even non-vegans, even anti-vegans would say that ideally, in an ideal world, they wouldn't be funding gas chambers, right? That would be a thing of the past. But Joey was the ringleader of this protest, this peaceful protest, of course, and he had to be called away. And it's because he was called on his phone by a journalist who worked for a newspaper organization, maybe the Telegraph. It was like a big organization, and the journalist wanted to interview him about this. The journalist said to him, so Joey, part of your campaign, you've been telling people that pigs are killed in gas chambers, but don't you think that's a little bit like incendiary? Don't you think that's a little bit provocative? Don't you think it's a bit extreme? Are you like sensationalizing this thing? I'll never forget Joey's response. He goes, well, you see, I describe it as gas chambers because the pigs are lowered into chambers that are filled with gas. That's like a Monty Python level of absurdity. If we are accused of sensationalizing something by saying that a gas chamber is a chamber filled with gas, then I don't know what you want to call it. Like, what do you want to call it? What do we call it? People don't want to partake in reality here. They want to live in a fantasy where the English language is just manipulated and all of the corners are rounded off to sanitize the reality of what we do to innocent animals. Vegans are constantly being accused of like appealing to emotions, as if that's a bad thing. What, is it a bad thing to appeal to people's sense of compassion nowadays? I think we should try to get better at calling out gaslighting when it happens and like calling people's attention to it and being like, look at what you're doing there. We need to shine a light on this, you know? But that's why I think gaslighting is dangerous, is because it's hard to call out. It's hard to call it out. Someone who's good with language can finely tune their level of gaslighting to where it is not quite perceptible enough to be noticed, but it's still very effective in that it can downplay the severity of a subject or position without being detectable. That's a really tricky problem that we have. Yeah, that would be my response.